Minn of the Mississippi by Holling Clancy Holling. Minn the turtle was rather small for this Mississippi. For miles she was a chip caught in rapids and falls. When her tiny rear leg tired, she would drift, until whack! Then she would push away from the boulder and paddle again. She fought to a shore, a brook, and a marsh. After a few weeks of life, Minn felt like a battered old turtle. She came alive when a crawfish tweaked her side. Her angry baby strike sent her enemy backward. Crows eyed its string of watery mud clouds puffing along the brook. A raccoon family saw the mud smoke and came crawfish hunting. They sat in water, gazing at nothing, feeling under boulders. A sleek otter swirled by like a shadow. Mink and otter, raccoons hunting for crawfish. Ducks hurtled out of the sky, ripping the surface with spread feet, skidding. To Minn they were monsters, hinged at the surface, plunging their heads straight down. They ate bugs and beetles, at times nibbling Minn's rubbery toes with iron-hard beaks. As the air of the wild rice swamp grew cooler, the sky was fairly a-rustle with leaves and more flying birds. Now spearheads of ducks and long-necked geese flashed by, and a mile up in the clear blue, a ghostly, shimmering ribbon of wild white swans. Flocking crows dotted the trees, cawing, shouting, shrieking, shattering the silence. Some decided to stay on into winter, but not the old crow, whose air trail southward lay above this marsh. He hated cold. With old cronies he flapped away. Little Minn felt numb. A cold-blooded reptile, she depended on warmth of air or water to keep her active. Searching in the slow, dull way for something, she spent long moments staring at muddy bottom. She had a desire to dig in it, deeply. Muskrat. Muskrats towed marsh roots to their rounded houses. Beaver stored poplar poles for their tasty bark. Otter and mink fished in ice-fringed streams. Big-footed snowshoe rabbits changed their brown coats to white. Pine squirrels flickered like running flames in the trees. Beaver. Then white flakes laid a pad over the earth to be stitched by everything moving, from mice to moose. New cold came, deeper snow. Life itself appeared to be chilled to an icy stop. Yet chipmunks and bears were only asleep. Frozen flies and mosquitoes were still living, while Minn, long since burrowed deep in the mud, was yet alive. Minn slept through the winter, living on the air stored in her strong lungs. Now, beneath mud and water, she felt new spring warmth. Like a sleepwalker, she dug her way out, floated to the surface, and breathed again. But floods hurled dazed Minn through the marsh and into the Mississippi. It was a week before she found a quiet new swamp. The food from her food sack, together with a few beetles and grubs, had carried her through winter hibernation. Now she was thin, weak, and hungry. Many a wiggling thing was snapped up to make Minn bigger. Some of her hunting was done by ambush. Under mud, unseen, her jaws snapped when food came near. An unlucky snail or worm promptly vanished. Sometimes she hunted by walking along the swamp bottom. Several kinds of turtles are bottom walkers, though awkward about it. Minn somehow balanced her weight so that enough of it held her down, and her rear end limp did not matter. Slowly she walked through veils of green water like a river spirit seeking forgotten things. Among swirling weeds, Minn in her stately, relentless tread, was an ancient monster marching out of the past. 2 inches of relentless monster, a born hunter. Bottom walking ambush. Minn's neighbors, the pert little terrapin, buttoned themselves to logs for hours, basking in the sun. Hot, dry sunlight discourages leeches and mossy growths, so the terrapin's shells were neatly smooth. Minn preferred watery shade to sun, and so leeches became her close company, and tiny plants upholstered her shell in green velvet. This mossy coating would be shed each year. As her shell grew, spreading outward, its top layer would peel off like shreds of snapshot film, leaving her smooth and clean. Minn was deaf, yet felt even faint vibrations. She was shy, but when she looked upon her world she saw clearly, and she knew one color from another. She had much common sense. In high water, Minn had settled in a deep pool of the swamp. When floods ran away, the pool shrank to a shallow pond. The day came when Minn's back bulged above a drying puddle, baking in the sun. Terrapin gulped food in or out of water, but Minn, a snapper, could not swallow easily except under water, and there just wasn't enough water left. A snapper's water pie for dinner. Fish, 34.2%. Carrion, dead things, 19.6%. Other vertebrates, having backbones, 2.2%. Water plants, 36.2%. Invertebrates, without backbones, such as insects, etc., 7.8%. Total pie, 100%. Percentages from Dr. Carl F. Logler, Economic Relations of Turtles. Minn had no intentions of starving. She splashed through scum to a baked clay bank and limped away. Minn on land was different from Minn in water. In a swamp she lived calmly, snapping mainly to capture food. Here, her sensitive eyes disliked bright sun. She felt mean enough to snap at anything. A porcupine met her and she hissed like a viper. The big bristling rodent backed up as she tottered past. When a fox put down an inquisitive nose, Minn lunged at it. Her shell was less than 3 inches, but her neck and tail were so long that almost 8 inches of angry reptile snaked forward in that strike. Though she missed and fell on her chin, the fox was impressed. When Minn arose again, an armored warrior advancing, the fox switched his plum of a tail from the brush that held it and thoughtfully trotted off into thick ferns. After all, he had eaten well this morning. Minn's waddling took her further away from the Mississippi. In a bubbling brook she ate happily, bottom walking upstream. But again, Minn's water world deserted her. One day the brook stopped flowing. It gurgled and ran away, while crows fell out of the sky to feast on flopping minnows and tadpoles in the mud. Minn scrambled to safety under draggled grass at the bank. She was confused. First, part of a wide swamp had shrunk to a puddle. Now a running brook had wandered away. Minn stared blankly around her. Then, seeming to get an idea, she started to walk. The gurgling brook had gasped, and then had run away downhill. Yet Minn walked up, to a ridge of dead trees, sod, and mud, making a dam and a pond. Boys who had built the dam and the brook called this place Old Swimmin' Hole. Their fathers just could not understand how a brook, choked with boulders, poles, and clay, produced better swimming than clean lakes and beaches of this summer resort land. The boys could not explain it either, except that, well, how could you feel that a long lake belonged to you? While the dam, built with your own hands, it made a swimming hole to be proud of, even if cows did think they owned the whole thing. Now, dried-out Minn took over. She owned the swimming hole. She found the pool to her liking. Exactly. But startled boys glimpsed a something, now here, now there, and raced for help. Fathers and sisters came to fight this monster.